And yeah, so what brings us to this conversation today? Well, the problem that we're seeing and we're hearing a lot from different agencies and consulting firms that we talk to is that many are chasing leads instead of really being able to time them. And what we're seeing and hearing is that traditional lead generation really isn't working the same way as it used to. And what's happening in the market is that your best prospects are making decisions before you even know that they're in market. And given the economic climate that we're in and just the competitive nature of the landscape, agencies and consulting firms, you guys are, really strapped for resources. So how do you do more with less? And how do you use new technology in order to, better target the prospects that you want to be talking to? And that's what we're going to unpack today. So the 5 main objectives that I'd love everybody to walk away from is, really a deep understanding of, why traditional lead gen is not working as well as it used to. How to identify real buying signals that indicate when a prospect is or nearing a purchase window. How to prioritize outreach using signal strength, not just a list that you've downloaded. And then, how do you explore, or we're going to explore practical tips and frameworks for tracking these signals, even if you don't have a big tech stack. And then finally, how are we going to align our sales and marketing, our business development team to convert these signals into meetings, into revenue, because that's what this is about, at the end of the day. So a little bit about our company and about me. So we are a growth consulting firm, and we help agencies and consulting firms land 6- and 7-figure opportunities predictably. And they come to us to solve problems such as low brand awareness amongst their target audience. They might be getting an insufficient number of leads or the wrong type of leads. Maybe you have stalled deals in the pipeline that you're looking to accelerate, or maybe you're having some retention or growth challenges and trying to land and expand within certain accounts. And ultimately, we help agencies, everything from your big holdco firms down to small boutiques that might be, 5 or 10 people. But our job is to help them land opportunities at companies like you see Netflix, Heineken, Signet, all ones that we've helped our clients get in the door with. So that's about the company. A little bit about me, very high level. So I am the founder and chief growth officer of our firm. Janet is our VP of client services. But I, started a concert promotion business out of high school. It would eventually grow into become also an experiential agency where we work with companies like Allstate and Disney, and ran that successfully for about 15 years. I ended up selling off some of the assets of that business, and then for the next 10 years or more, worked in various agencies, independent holdco agencies in business development. And then about 5 years ago now, decided to branch off on my own again and started this company here today. So all in all, have about 20 years of experience helping B2B companies with growth. So before we get started, Janet, if you can get going, I'd love to hear, for everybody that's on here, how difficult has new business been for your firm compared to the past 12 months? And there should be a poll that pops up, so feel free to answer that, and we'll come back to the results here in a few minutes. So before we get into the results, I want to talk about what we're seeing out there and perhaps what you're experiencing as well. But overall, as we've mentioned, traditional lead generation is not working the same. And what we're seeing is that a lot of firms are still very reliant on referrals. And while referrals are great, they're also unpredictable. And 71% of agencies are still relying on referrals as their primary source of new business. This is according to research done by RSW. So that alone is likely not going to get you to where you want to go, especially when we're in, tough economic climate, and you're trying to maybe grow in certain strategic directions. So over-reliance on referrals is definitely a challenge. What we're also seeing is SEO. There's a lot of challenges with SEO, and I'm sure there are some agencies on here that do SEO for clients. I'm talking about this more from the lens of an agency using SEO or a consulting firm using SEO to generate leads for your own firm. And Gartner here has predicted by next year, so only not even a year away from now, that there's going to be a further 25% drop in search engine volume due to AI and virtual agents. And I think we've all, I'm assuming, have started using to some various levels ChatGPT and the other resources, and can probably attest that you're not going to Google the same way as you used to. And this just kind of has been accelerated. There's already been drops in people using SEO in the years before. So using SEO to generate leads for your firm is really becoming more and more challenging. And then the other thing that we're seeing a lot of is cold email is really becoming less and less effective when it's done in a true kind of cold email approach. So research done by a company named Belkin's found that from 2023 to 2024, there was a drop from 6.2% to 4.2% in reply rates from C-suite execs. So it's a pretty significant drop. And what we're seeing even from 24 to 25, that drop is increasing even further. So it's harder and harder to break through and reach prospects from some of the traditional ways that you've been able to generate business in the past. So with that said, we did a poll, we did a webinar actually back in February of 25 that found, and we did the same question that we asked here today, and 70% of respondents said that it was somewhat harder or significantly harder to acquire new business. And from what I'm seeing here right now, we're at 76%, if I'm reading this correctly, are now saying that it's somewhat harder or significantly harder. So another 6%, almost more than 3/4 of everybody on here is experiencing more challenges. And I'm not surprised, because I think when we did this webinar, this was kind of before the tariffs really hit hit home. So I think that has definitely impacted a lot of the clients and prospects that we've talked about, that a lot of companies are nervous about the direction and holding back maybe some budget and some projects that they had been talking to. A lot of deals are stalled. So I'm not surprised that this has actually gone up over time. So interesting. Hopefully the next webinar, that number will start to go down, not up. So what else is sort of happening out there? I think it would be, it's very good to go over this particular thing. And maybe you've seen this before, but in the B2B context, there's something known as the 95-5 rule. So this group, I'm going to butcher the name, but Ehrenberg Bass Institute did research into what percentage of your audience is in market for services like yours at any given time. And what their research shows is that approximately about 5% are active buyers that are in market for your services. So that means that 95% of your audience is not necessarily in market for your services. And some may never be, but then there's another group that, they're out there and they may be in market at a certain given time. So I think sometimes we forget, because we want things to happen on our own timeline. But the reality is, just like you may not be in the market for a car today, but at 3-year mark, you might be in the market for a car. It's the same thing that happens in a B2B context. So I want to share this because this next slide, I think, is going to really bring this home, is that B2B buyers are nearly 70% through their purchasing process before they engage with sellers. And this is also something that's changing and increasing over time. And why this is relevant and how this connects back to the previous slide is that, the 5% are in market, but then there's that 95% that are not. But it doesn't mean that they're not researching. They are out there researching on their own. In the past, they may have needed to contact someone in the sales or the new business department and have conversations, but now they're doing all of this research on their own online. So all of these activities are happening, and you're not even in the room, to be a part of those conversations oftentimes. And this next stat, I think, is also very interesting, is that buyers already have a preferred vendor at the time of contact more than 80% of the time. So they're out there doing their own research and forming their own short list. So all this activity is happening, behind the scenes. So if you're just focusing on the 5% that are in market, you're really missing out on all these other opportunities. And, what we're here today to talk about is, how you can look at these various, using digital technologies, how you can look at these different signals that are happening, because they're giving off signals that you can start to track and you can look at that would indicate that they might be in that group that is about to be in market, or maybe in market currently right now. And that's what leads us to signal-based outreach. So what is signal-based outreach? Our definition of that is contacting specific prospects based on event triggers or engagement activities to reach them at the right time with the right message. And I'm going to talk about what we mean by each one of those here. So the process that we're going to walk through today of signal-based outreach is, how do you identify the signals that are relevant to your business? How do you monitor and then capture those signals? How do you prioritize and qualify them? And how do you personalize and engage your outreach to these prospects? And then how do you measure and report? And that's really going to be a bulk of what we're going to talk about, is walking you through this process. And I hope that you'll find this very actionable, that you could take and start implementing these things right away. So in terms of identifying the signals, I talked about event triggers and engagement activities, the two different buckets that we look at. So when we're talking about event triggers, these are an event or a change involving a prospect, their company, their industry, or even your relationship that would signal potential interest in your products or services. So some examples of what that might be. I know a lot of agencies and consultancies have grown through, again, more referral models. So they do great work for one client, that their main point of contact moves on to another firm. So that would be a client or champion job change. So that could be a trigger that they might be in market or be interested in having a conversation about your services. Maybe you work with startups. So if a company gets funded, that could be a trigger that indicate that they might be in market for your services. Or maybe you're a branding agency that and there's a merger and acquisition between two companies, and now they may be looking to come up with some new brand. So again, every client that we work with, the triggers that are most relevant to them does vary. And this is not an exhaustive list, but just some of the common ones that we see come up over and over again. So that's the one bucket, event triggers. The second bucket is what we call engagement activity. So this is when a prospect interacts with your content or brand, which would signal potential interest in your products or services. So some examples of that could be maybe you have a piece of gated content on your website and somebody downloads that. That level of engagement could indicate some interest in your products or services. Maybe somebody at your target audience connects with you on LinkedIn. Maybe they sign up for your newsletter, or they register for your webinar. So these are all potential engagement activity signals then that are being sent that could indicate that there is some level of interest in your products or services. So I'd like to actually, if everybody would maybe put this in the chat, but I'd love to know kind of what are some of the different types of signals that you'd love to track, but maybe you don't know how to track. So for example, maybe in your experience working with clients, if this thing happens in their business, you perhaps may you've oftentimes gotten meetings, or you've closed business with different clients. So I'd love to kind of hear what some of the different signals are that either you track or you'd love to track. I think there might have been a question. Does Jasmine have one? Did you see that, Janet? Oh,
I didn't. Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope.
I saw a hand raise or something. So okay. All good, all good. I saw some sort of reaction happen. So
We're starting to get some of the signals. Past clients moving to new roles. Yep. Shopping for a partner. We track with a SEO forecast. Unhappy with current agency or current marketing. What's that signal for that? It's a good question.
Yeah. Excellent. So we'll let these kind of populate here, and then maybe at the end we can, look at some of those, and maybe there's some that we have answers to, and maybe there's some that, are interesting that we haven't cracked yet either. So that's really the first step, right? We got to identify, number one, what are those signals that we want to be tracking that we think are most relevant to our business? But then to kind of lead into this part here is, how do we monitor and capture those signals? And there's so many interesting tools now that can help. So when we talk about the event trigger side of things, again, this is not exhaustive. It's I don't want to bore you guys with a lot of text, but just to kind of give you some ideas here, client or champion job changes. That is very easy to be tractable nowadays with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Perhaps there's a closed lost opportunity in your CRM and you want to keep track of that and come back to those at a certain period of time. Well, using your CRM, like Copper, for example, makes it very easy to track those. Maybe job postings, for example, if they're hiring for a certain position, LinkedIn Jobs, a great resource. A lot of really interesting job sites that you could get this information from. Again, back to the funding rounds, Crunchbase, a great resource for that. Or if they have certain technologies that they've implemented on their website, BuiltWith is a great resource. So a number of different resources for different event triggers. Same thing from the engagement activity side, website visitor traffic. So tools like Demand Sense can track not only companies that are visiting your website, but also individuals. It could identify that might be visiting your website, and it could tell you what pages they viewed, how long they were on the website, how many visits they had. So really interesting, rich data that can come out of these tools. Again, to the individual level as well. Email newsletters, analytics, or email nurture programs. So tools like MailChimp can do this. Social media engagement, tools like Trigify, and then content downloads. Maybe again, you have gated content. So, depending on how you have that link, maybe with your CRM, HubSpot forms could do that. So there are a lot of different tools net available to, to track these various engagement activities. So in kind of a perfect world, how this all works is you have all these various event triggers and engagement activities, and all of this gets kind of fed into your central CRM. And that's kind of ideally how it would work. But there are some limitations. Some of these different tools won't integrate with your CRM. Or they may not be in real time. So we're going to kind of talk through, or maybe you don't even have a CRM. So we're going to talk through a couple different, ways to think about this. But I do want to, load up another poll here because I would be curious to know, what CRM system, or do you have a CRM system, is your firm currently using? So Jan, if you want to load up that one, and then
loading right now, and they're going.
Excellent, excellent. I am curious how many do not have a CRM.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we can come back to this here in a second as you guys answer. So with that said, in terms of tracking these various signals, we recognize that a lot of our clients may not have CRMs. Oftentimes that happens, or there's just so many different signals that we're trying to track, and there's not integrations that happen. So I don't want tech to get in the way of this program here, and I don't want people not moving forward with something like this because the tech sounds too expensive or too complicated. So I want to show a little bit like kind of behind the scenes of what we've built, and we call this our signal tracker, and we use this for our clients as well. And I'm not going to go into super depth, but I want to just kind of share a little bit about how we think about it and how we use this to prioritize some of the clients that we have. So with that said, basically what we do is you'll see here on the bottom, there's a number of different sheets: newsletter clicks, newsletter opens, CB new connections, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all the different signals that we're tracking. And what we do is we load this all into a sheet. So in this case, these are newsletter subscribers that we had added in that particular time period. And you'll see that there is a website associated with each of these. Well, what we also have here is we have our master list. So for us, at least, we're tracking approximately 5,000 companies meet our ICP that we're trying to get in front of on any given time. And what each one of these sheets does, it tracks back to the master list. So you could see, for example, in this column K, or let me do L is a better one. So which one of these companies here opened our newsletter? So in this case, this company Material, MDR, Casual IQ, all open the newsletter. So each one of these sheets is feeding into this master list here and showing what the different signals were happening. So we can then look here, we have this sorted by number of signals. So in this time period, Material, for example, there was 7 total account engagements. So that is interesting to us, and maybe that means that this particular company is more in market and interested for services like ours, and we may want to do some direct outreach to them. And you can kind of sort down and you'll start to see that there are some companies that are 1, or we even get down lower and there's 0. So again, this is a spreadsheet. We built it on our own. It's down and dirty. It doesn't cost much to do. It takes a little bit of time to organize it. But, again, this is sort of, I think, hopefully just kind of gives you a little bit of a visual of how this can kind of come together. And, again, we could talk more about this later. But let me go back to this. So yeah, let's talk about that poll. So what did we
I
find?
was going to say, you want me to share here comes the results.
Yeah, let's see it.
43% HubSpot, 22% Salesforce, kind of what we expected. And then Copper at 3, Pipedrive, Monday at 3, so on. Other hit a nice 16%. And not using a CRM, 9%.
Okay.
So pretty good. I mean, at least I'm seeing that, we're seeing that people are using a CRM. Now, hopefully the other word is you're really using it.
Right. Yeah. Maybe have a CRM and use are two different things.
Exactly. Exactly.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. All right. So let's get back to this. So now when we're talking about, prioritizing, how do we prioritize and qualify these? And what you saw on the spreadsheet that I shared was really just a listing of all the different signals. But the reality is not all signals are created the same. There is a spectrum. Somebody who just opens a cold email might be a very low signal that they're actually interested in your services. Versus on the other end of the spectrum, somebody who visits your website, goes to your services page, goes to your pricing page, goes to your contact page, but doesn't fill out the form, that can be considered a very high signal for you. And then there's obviously, different signals along in the middle. So that's something just to consider when you're, looking at these various signals and weighting some more than the other. Which leads me to, scoring. So, most of the people I'm assuming, on this, aren't necessarily doing something like this right now, the signal-based selling. So I don't want to get bogged down again on scoring models, but there's kind of 2 ways you could go about this. You could kind of create a scoring model out of the gate and just sort of take your best guess at it and then refine it over time. Or maybe you hold back, you don't do any scoring, and then after you have the program up and running and you start actually seeing, okay, which of these signals seem to be leading to meetings and seeming to revenue, and then kind of going back and creating a scoring system. But again, this goes back to the spectrum based on what you see in your data, which one of these signals seem to be stronger than the other. And then you could kind of take that spreadsheet that I shared and really start to get some really interesting insights into which prospects you want to prioritize outreach to. What I also think is interesting here is what we call signal stacking. So this is where you don't necessarily just rely on one signal, you're looking at multiple signals. So I'll give you an example. Maybe one of your target companies, there was a job change. They just hired a new chief marketing officer at their company. And then, also another signal that you're tracking is they got funded maybe 3 months prior to that. And then you see someone on their marketing team registers for one of your webinars. So now you're seeing 3 different signals across the board, and that starts to tell a story of what might be happening at that organization. And this is really where the magic happens with the signals. Is not just somebody opened a cold email once, but when you start to see these various signals and you can start to maybe tell a story between the two. So that, I think, is something to really consider and think about, and that's why it's important to track a lot of different types of signals so you can see these types of things, happening. So now, we've identified the signals that are relevant to us. We've been able to figure out how to monitor and capture them. We've prioritized them. Now we actually have to do outreach to them. And with outreach, there are a number of different ways to think about that through an account-based marketing approach. You could do true one-to-one outreach to these prospects with hyper-personalized messaging. You could do maybe one-to-few type of outreach where it's more of a cluster that you're reaching out to with a certain message. What we want to avoid here is the one-to-many With the signal-based approach, we don't really need to do one-to-many. So one-to-one might be, I don't know, it depends again on your resources, but maybe it's the top 10, top 20, top 30 prospects that you're seeing have very strong signals, and there's multiple signals. Those are stacking ones. So it's really worth it to do additional research and write something hyper-personalized to that particular company and that individual. But maybe there's another group that, you've seen success with that signal before, but it's maybe not, you're not seeing a lot of them. It's not maybe signal stacking. So for example, maybe you see a lot of success historically when, again, maybe a new CEO comes into the company, and then that means they want to shake things up and, hire a company like yours for services, but you're not really seeing a lot of additional signals from that company. Well, it still might be worth reaching out to all of those companies that have a new CEO with a message that's, very personalized around, again, them bringing on a new CEO. So again, you're going to tailor your messaging approach kind of based on the strength and the number of signals that you're receiving. The idea, though, again, you don't want to do the one-to-many. That doesn't work. That's the kind of traditional, lead cold email approach that's no longer working. So to give you kind of some real life examples here, so one of the engagement activities that we track is newsletter subscriptions. So what you could do here is you see somebody that meets your ICP and have subscribed to your newsletter, you can send them a direct email and, hi, prospect, I saw you recently subscribed to our Next Big Win newsletter. Thank you. Out of curiosity, how did you hear about us? What inspired you to subscribe? So again, this message now is tailored very specific to the engagement signal that you have received from them. This is not just throwing them into a drip sequence and sending them emails, emails that they may or may not want. You're taking a more personalized approach, with this based on the engagement activity that you received. Another example, kind of back to this executive hire one, is, again, maybe there was a new chief marketing officer that came into a role. So you might have a specific messaging that you send to them, hey, congrats on the new role at Kellogg's. I noticed, your career took you from a barista at a coffee shop to CMO at a major CPG brand. What a journey. Would you be open to sharing your story on our CMOs on the Move podcast? So again, this is a signal, in this case, an event trigger that happened. A new CMO comes in, and now again, you're doing some research to understand, what did their career journey, what are they doing? But beyond that, what I want to also share is that you're also tailoring with what you might call like a lead magnet or an offer that's specific to this event trigger. So rather than, again, just saying, hey, CMO, do you want to get on a call so we could tell you all about our services? You might actually start to create specific things that, that you want to offer these particular prospects. So in this case, this is something that we've done in the past where, again, rather than just reach out to the CMOs, we are inviting them onto a podcast that we create to build a relationship with them. And we found that these CMOs, they like, especially when they're new to the role, they like to talk about, their journey. They're really proud, as they should be, with their accomplishments that they've had. So again, but this is created specifically for that event trigger that we receive. So again, depending on the signals you're tracking, you may want to think through not just messaging, but specific offers and content and things like that that you want to share with them. So another question that I get a lot is, well, when should the outreach happen? Like, does this need to be like in real time? And I think it depends, right? And I'll walk through a couple scenarios. So if you're a website, someone visits your website, relevant page, well, maybe you want to reach out to that in a day because that's one of our strongest signals typically if they're hitting our website with and visiting specific pages. Maybe there's a funding round announcement. Well, in this case, maybe if you're like a PR and media, agency, you want to reach out to in a week. It's not as important to reach out that day, to them, but maybe within a week. But on the other hand, maybe you are responsible for CRM implementations, and you've found that when they announce funding, that's not their top priority, but that's typically something that they'll do within 6 months. So maybe then you want to reach out to them in 6 months' time. So again, every signal is a little bit different based on the services that you offer, and there's not a one size fits all. And you really got to think about the particular signal and what makes most sense for your business and that particular signal. Now, that being said, you need a way to keep track of all of this that's happening. And, again, we have our friends over at Copper, on the line with us and a part of this because, this is where really a CRM, comes into play. So you may, track that signal, have that prospect, put them into your CRM, but then you need a way to, continue to nurture that relationship, over time, whether that be because you're reaching out to them in, in kind of real time with things, or maybe in that CRM example, you want to reach out to in 6 months. So a platform like Copper is able to allow you to automate specific emails to prospects as they move from different stages. You can flag alerts, and you can kind of see what deals may be stalling and nudge them to follow up, all through automation. And again, Jessica and Jasmine are here. If you have any questions about, CRM or Copper in particular, they're happy to answer those, in our Q&A section. But yeah, some other things about Copper, they also have a Chrome extension. I know this is, super helpful when doing prospecting, because you may see an interesting signal on LinkedIn, and then you want an easy way to get that into your CRM. So they have an extension for that, along with a number of other different integrations. So, whether you're using Copper or using something else, again, they're online. We can answer some questions in the Q&A section. So I have another poll, but as you kind of have heard about this throughout this presentation today, I'd be curious, what would be the biggest reason that your firm might not move forward with some approach like this? So Janet, if you want to load up that poll, but I'm kind of curious what the perceived kind of roadblocks may be, and then we'll come back to this in a moment. So the last step of the process here is, how do we measure and report on this? And the way we think about this is through this graph, and I know it's not the most visually exciting thing here, but I'll explain all of this for you. It all really starts with identifying the targeted companies that you want to track. You can't really do signal-based selling if you're not knowing what you're actually who you're trying to track signals for. So it starts with defining who your target audience happens to be. In our case, like an example I showed you, we've identified 5,000 companies that we want to be tracking. The second thing, market reach, is what we look at is, now, of those number of companies, how many of them at least demonstrated one engagement activity in that particular time period. So for example, if you're tracking 1,000 companies and 600 of them gave at least one signal, that would be a 60% market reach. And the idea then for all the marketing people on here is that your marketing activities are supposed to be driving these engagement activities, and month over month, hopefully you're penetrating more and more accounts with more and more activities. Which leads us to the second thing, which is account engagement. So now this is when we take all the different engagement activities that we're tracking, website visits, email opens, social media, et cetera, and we add those all up. And then we see, okay, in the month of, let's call it May, we had whatever it is, 1,000 different interactions that all of our marketing efforts did. And again, the idea is how do we grow this month over month? And then we look at engaged accounts. And what we mean by that is, this is where you're seeing engagement activities across multiple people within an organization. And the reason why this is important is because what we've seen, and others have corroborated this, if you can get 2 or more people that are engaging with you, the likelihood of that turning into a meeting and turning into revenue is exponentially higher. So if it's just kind of one person in your organization, it's not as strong as multiple. And that leads to, you have to, in this day and age, really be trying to influence the entire buying committee. It's not just one person that's making these decisions. So your marketing efforts need to go beyond just one individual. But that is a really great way to see who is really engaged with you if there's multiple people. So those are all what we call leading indicators. So if you're trying to get a program like this off the ground, the reality is you're not going to immediately have revenue. As much as I would love to say that that's how it works, it doesn't. But these are good metrics that you could track early on to see and show your leadership that this program is working. We're getting in front of the right people. It's growing month over month. But then we move into where the rubber hits the road. It's got to eventually start leading to meetings with that target audience. So you're going to want to track that. And then ultimately, is this leading to influence pipeline and revenue, down the road as well? So we've found that this to be a good way to, again, kind of show leadership the results initially of the marketing efforts, and then how it's translating into meetings and revenue. And then, here's just kind of a slide that shows this is all kind of made up information, but you could track this on a monthly basis. How big is your market? What was the reach in that month? How many account engagements did you have? How many engaged accounts, meetings, and influence pipelines? So you can start to see kind of a visual and how this could come to life for your firm. So that's the 5 steps. Now you might be, I don't know, Janet, are there any questions that are worth asking right now?
Well, I think there was one that I wanted to come back to, as long as we're in the signal world here. Lizzie asked, the signal-based selling strikes me as being similar to MQLs and SQLs. So can we touch on strategies that would be related to understanding company-wide reach instead of looking at individual contacts?
Touch on strategy related to understand company-wide research. Yeah, I think if I'm understanding the question, correctly, you may, you may see an individual that is, downloaded a white paper and could be considered an MQL or SQL. And I think again, it kind of goes back to how are you now going to influence more of the buying committee, and what are the different channels that you're operating in that you can potentially do that. So one of the things that we recommend is if you see this activity, if you're doing LinkedIn ads, for example, you can target to individuals. So you could, make sure that the whole buying committee is in your LinkedIn campaign, so more of them see that. If you're doing more kind of cold email campaigns, again, you could be reaching out to different decision makers, and reaching them via email. What else could you potentially do? Your email newsletter. You could be, adding specific prospects to your email newsletter, invites to different events that you might be hosting. So I think, the idea is really, I think there's any number of ways to reach them. It's really more so operationalizing that when you see, somebody that's in your ICP that has engaged with you, having then some specific, strategies then that you're reaching out to them, and just even being aware that that's something that you need to try to do and do something proactively in order to make that happen. So hopefully that helps.
Right. One more question in this section that I think we should bring up. Somebody asked, why are we taking a day's time to reach out to people that have relevant page visits onto our website?
If you have the ability to reach out in real time, I would say do it. But the reality is most of us, are not sitting in front of, the computer and being able to bounce on everybody right away. But I would say you want to do it within at least 1 day, but this doesn't necessarily mean wait a day to do it.
Great. We also do have the poll results. So if we'd like to, I can share the results there from biggest reason your firm might not be moving towards signal-based outreach. And it really is, the first one seems to be more of the story.
Yeah.
Lack of internal bandwidth, just not having enough time or people to manage it.
Yep. Yep. And that makes sense. And I know we're all being asked to do more with less, especially in the agency and consulting space, where we're already running kind of lean teams and working a lot on clients. So I'm not surprised, I guess, to see that.
But it does show that 22% are doing this, actively running something similar already. So that's great. I mean, it's a good indicator that this is growing and more people are adopting it.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So as we think about operationalizing this signal-based approach and aligning kind of sales and marketing, when we're thinking about try to traditional old way would be, okay, we want to win a CPG client. We build a broad, target list, and we spray and pray. We send out a message to, everybody on that list and try to get a meeting. And that's what we're saying is not really working. The new way is really about defining that total relevant market, having a named target account list that you want to reach. So, and not just saying, oh, we want to win, a CPG company, actually having a list of names of the companies that you want to reach, and then developing thought leadership content that is relevant to that particular audience, that is focused on problems that, that particular audience segment is experiencing, and you have a unique point of view on how to solve. And then getting that thought leadership in front of those prospects through demand generation. So again, email newsletters and LinkedIn ads, et cetera, to make sure that they actually see it and it doesn't just live on your website. And then because of that, you're going to start to see more of these engagement activities happening. And then that's when your, biz dev team or sales team can do this signal-based approach. So this is really, we're trying to move away from, the spray and pray and really into a much more hyper-targeted, relevant way to reach out to these particular prospects. And this all, again, this relies on sales and marketing alignment. And, we see it a lot in our business where, we're brought in and sometimes our clients will have a existing marketing, team that's producing marketing. But what we're doing and what they're doing is not connected whatsoever. We're off prospecting in a certain category and they're, creating content that isn't necessarily relevant. So we really we need to bring those together. And to start, that really means that executive buy-in. This really does need to start from the top if this is going to be successful. You do need that ICP and those target accounts named. That's really critically important. You need to define the roles in the workflows. Who's going to be responsible for what? There's a lot of moving pieces here when you're talking about tracking these different signals and then following up. Which leads me to the next one is having, personalized and relevant content that you could share. For example, back to the example I said about the CMOs on the Move podcast, that was a specific content strategy that could be used for that particular signal. So do you have, content that can be shared for the various signals that you are tracking? And then, you're going to have signal review meetings. This is something that's going to evolve over time. You're going to add signals. You're going to realize some signals maybe don't make any sense. And then again, you're going to have a shared tracking and reporting system that, brings all of this together, something similar to, what we shared earlier. Another question that I get a lot is, is this automated? Is this manual? And again, if you're someone that's just starting off, which it sounds like most, there's maybe 20% that are doing something similar, but that means 80% are not. And again, I don't want tech to get in the way of getting this started. We've already talked about a spreadsheet that you could use, but there are pros and cons to the automation and the manual. Automation is obviously much faster. It could be done, in real time. The manual process is slower and much more time intense. The cost of automation, it might be more initially to get things set up, but after it's set up and running, it's going to be much lower cost than having someone pulling reports and manually doing all of this. That said, automation sometimes could be less accurate. We found some of the tools don't necessarily always pull in the data, or the data may be a little bit murky at times. Someone who the platform might say, hey, that's not your ICP, but when you look at it manually, you're like, oh, this is a great contact for us. So sometimes, that manual human, is able to make some inferences that, just the automation is just not able to do yet. Maybe that changes with AI. And then integrations, that happen, with automation, obviously that's dependent on the tech. There sometimes are breakdowns in these integrations that happen. So you do have to have someone kind of reviewing that. Versus the manual, it's a little bit more flexible. You can kind of adjust and pull these reports, as needed. And so pros and cons to each, but I think the story here I really want to take away is like, it doesn't have to be this elaborate tech stack. You can get started with this on more of a manual way to start. So I did want to spend a couple of minutes just talking through a quick case study of how this came to life, for us actually. So in this case, there was a prospect that hit our website, and you can see on the left side some of the tracking that we had available to us that they, on December 30th, they visited 3 different pages on our website. So that was some signal that was captured. And then what we saw is a different person at the company. In this case, it was 2 co-founders, one founder and then the other founder. Now the other founder was apparently on our email newsletter and opened the newsletter. So that then flagged things in our system that this might be an engaged account, right? There are now 2 people that are demonstrating a different signal. So what we did then, that was flagged. And then I took a look at the particular company and was really quite impressed with their content that they were creating. They were very active on LinkedIn. They had an email newsletter. And that then sparked an idea that, they might benefit from, sparked a question, I should say. Are they looking at the different signals then that they are producing from this content? Or are they producing the content and hoping somebody, comes as an inbound lead? So I then, wrote them a personalized email. I mentioned again their presence, their newsletter. So this is a one-to-one true email that came to them. It did take me some time to do the research, but 20 minutes later, I got a response back from the founder that said, "This is great. How long is the workshop? Let's do it." So again, would I have the time to do this across all 5,000 contacts in our database? Obviously, no way I could do the research for this. But by tracking these various signals, this particular company popped up high on the list, and it was worth that extra effort. And because they already knew us and they've seen some of our content already, they were more likely to want to engage with us in a conversation. So as you think about this for yourself, if this is something you're considering, I think, again, some of the things to consider are, what event triggers or engagement activities are most relevant to your firm? What sales and marketing tech do you have to track signals? How would you prioritize and qualify companies to prospect or target? What playbooks or offers do you have or can you create for specific actions? And then how are you going to measure? Those are some things to think about if you're considering this type of program. But ultimately, again, the process, how to identify the signals, how to monitor and capture, how to prioritize, personalize, engage, and then measure and report on that. So this is the process, and everybody's going to get a copy of this deck as well. But that concludes this part. We're going to leave. We got probably about 10 minutes left for some Q&A here. But before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to make an offer, and I know Copper does as well. But if this is something, if this sparks some interest, whether you're the 20% that's doing this and looking to get more out of it, or this sounds interesting and you want to talk about how this might work for your firm, we'd be happy to set up 30-minute consultation with anybody here where we could look at your program, we could look at some of the triggers, ideate around different ideas, and ultimately determine if there's some way that maybe we could help on an ongoing basis. And then Copper, if you're interested in learning more about their platform, at the end of the day, Copper is going to help you. You identified those prospects. How do you then put them into a CRM, manage it, and do some automated outreach to them? So they're actually making an offer of 15% discount on any annual subscriptions. And there's going to be a booking link that I'll send in the follow-up email, because again, everybody's going to get a copy of this, and I'll put a link there if you want to learn more about them and book a demo. But yeah, that concludes the content portion of this. As I mentioned, Jessica and Jasmine from Copper are available, so if you have questions for them or for us, fire away.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's start out with one question that we did get here from Alex. He's asking, have you leveraged any AI tools to help with creating the signal tracker?
AI to help with the signal tracker itself. So the form that we've actually created, we're actually in process of doing some of that, particularly more around the scoring is where we want to take the AI. So we haven't built that yet, but that's really kind of in our roadmap over the next couple of weeks to help, again, kind of identify, who are the right prospects to reach out to, given the strength, on that spectrum that I shared. So yeah, so I think that's definitely an easy use case for it. I would say another thing, that I guess it's sort of AI, maybe, I don't know how you want to look at AI, but just enriching some of the data. AI can really help with that, because depending on the platform you get the signal from, it may be incomplete. It may only give you an email address or a company name or something. So you may need to enrich some of that data so you could actually use it, and AI can help with that.
Excellent, excellent. A couple more questions coming in. One thing I did want to go back to, this was an earlier question. I did want to come back to it. Somebody was asking, is cold email open rates at all relevant now as a signal? Knowing how things are changing in the bot world, as we call it. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the way we typically look at email opens is multiple opens. Just one open could very easily be, it could be a mistake, number one, or it could just be a bot that's opening it to, scan for viruses or phishing type of emails. But if you see, I don't know, usually the threshold we think about is probably like 5. That generally means that either that individual has opened it legitimately multiple times, or maybe they forwarded on to somebody else in the company, which again would be probably a pretty good signal if they felt compelled to forward it. So I think, there's still a place for the opens, but probably just one open is not a very strong signal at all.
Exactly. I think this is a good question too. Is figuring out the best triggers a trial and error? Do you look at deal history? Kind of where do you start to figure out what could be the right triggers?
That's a good question. I think probably the best place to start would be your deal history, and if you have that information, hopefully in your CRM or just anecdotally, thinking back and looking at that, that would probably be the best place to start. But overall, yeah, I would say it's a trial and error. I mean, we're doing the same for our company, and we do it for clients as well, where we might have a hunch that this might work, and we'll roll up some campaigns and try it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then you tweak it and you go from there. And there's a variety of factors on why it may or may not work. Maybe it's the right signal, but your message or offer is not the right message or offer for that signal. So there's a lot of variables that could impact it that you're consistently experimenting though.
Yep, makes sense. Raven has a couple questions. Kind of, she said, "Hey, I know I came in a little late, but can you speak to what you consider to be a general best practice following up with prospects via email, like an overall approach?"
Yeah, I think typically we will start with email. It's the most efficient, way to go about it. But if we're not seeing a response and we feel like we should, because this is a real reason to reach out, we will, sometimes just pick up the phone and try to reach them that way. Or LinkedIn, we will, send them a connection request or a DM, on LinkedIn. But generally, we start with email, and while I did share a lot of stats around cold email being dead and this and that, but when we're talking more of this signal-based approach, the open rates, reply rates are exponentially higher than a kind of just cold email out of the blue. So we still do see results that way.
For sure. And her follow-up is, her point is, circling back one time per month seems too much. But what would be the best practice where it doesn't negatively impact that chances of winning a first informational meeting? What's the cadence?
Yeah, I think what we typically will do is, we might send a couple emails as part of a little bit of a cluster. So maybe it's 2 or 3 emails after we've seen a strong signal. But if we don't, and that's probably within a week, and maybe over a couple multiple channels, maybe it's a phone call also, maybe it's a LinkedIn. But yeah, if we haven't gotten a response in that window, then we will pause outreach. And then I would say usually it's once a month is not really what we would advise. It's maybe once a quarter. But also depends on what are you trying to say to them? Like, do you have some unique, different content that you can put in front of them, a different offer, a different invite? And if you have something really compelling, I'm not saying you have to even wait a quarter, but generally, I think 90 days is kind of a good rule of thumb.
Yep. Mhm. Okay. Question regarding Zoom Info.
Okay.
Your thoughts on Zoom Info website feature where you can see the page views from a company versus paying for the feature where they give the actual person at that company doing a search. Is it worth the extra money to get that feature?
Yeah, the website visitor company level, I think it's a great data point, but at least with our clients, we do a lot of work more on the enterprise level where, there could be one person at Amazon. Where do you even begin to reach out to Amazon if you're going to try to do a more one-to-one approach where there's, hundreds or maybe thousands of even potential prospects that could have been. So I do think if you're going to do a true, signal-based selling, I do think you should have the person contact level as part of the program, and try that out. I think it would be worth the investment if you're doing this type of program.
Right. And if you're really going after SMBs, much smaller company, maybe there's enough there. But they said for the most part, for going after enterprise, yeah, there's too many people to evaluate. Okay, another question. What are the things you take into consideration when writing a hyper-personalized email for relevant stakeholders, despite knowing that they won't be interested in reading a long email? So how do you keep it concise, but make it relevant?
Yeah. Well, I think our rule of thumb is, and there's a lot of data that backs it up, is, but we really try to keep emails 100 words or less, which is tough. It's not easy, right? To pack everything you want to say. But I think what is different about this approach is the keyword you mentioned is relevance, right? You're not necessarily have to tell them everything. Oh, we're an agency and we do A, B, and C, and we're found, you don't need to do all of that. You need to focus it just on what that trigger was. And, for example, if they're on in your website and they visit a certain page on the website, you could reference something from that, or if they've downloaded a piece of content. So you can be much more, direct into what you're reaching out to them about, and not have to, cloud the message with all these other various things that, make the email super long. And then again, think about this also as a multi-step process. So maybe there's 3 emails in a sequence. You don't have to say everything in the first email. Say one thing and then maybe bring another value proposition in the second email, and the third email might be something different to them. Um, so yeah, so hopefully that helps. But when we're using various tools to kind of help keep our messages concise, and make them we like to write emails at an 8th grade reading level or below. We like to keep them short. So there's tools like Hemingway app and Grammarly, and even, turning to AI for some inspiration, like ChatGPT. So I think, the tools are there. It's definitely possible. And I think, honestly, it's easier to keep those types of messages because you know what they're interested in, or you know how they interacted, versus when you're just doing something cold and you have no idea.
Excellent. Okay, we have 2 minutes. I'm gonna have one last question, unless you've got anything else, everyone. If you have a last minute question, please throw it in there. Um, but I would ask, which signals would you recommend tracking first if you do have a limited capacity? Where do you start?
Yeah, I would say the first things to track would be the engagement activities, the first party things that are happening. So I'm going to bucket these together, but your website visitors, those are really great ones. Those that are engaging with you on social. I would really focus, if you have limited budget and time, focus on those that are engaging directly in your brand versus the event triggers, which aren't maybe you don't know that they know who you are, versus the first party signals on your website and email and social media is a little bit better. So I would say that. And then, one other thing, I'll caveat that a little bit, like if you're looking to do something similar to this, where we like to start a lot of these programs is actually looking at your past clients, and looking, or your people that you've worked with in the past, and have they moved on to other jobs. So that could be like, if you're just kind of starting and looking for quick wins, like that would probably be the number one place that I would look at, because they've already worked with you, or they already know you, they've been involved in a pitch. I would probably start there, and then maybe move into the signal, the engagement activities.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. I believe we've answered a majority of the questions here, and if we've missed any, please feel free to email Christian or I. And yes, you are all getting the deck.
Yeah, so get the deck, you'll get a recording. We'll get that hopefully out. I think tomorrow is when that's scheduled to go out.
Excellent. Okay.
All
Thank
right,
you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.